Hello, my name is Emily Montgomery, and I am the program coordinator in International and Academic English at the University of California in Davis. And today I'll be talking about how to equip ITAs with the vocabulary and context of DEI. And I'll try to go through it fairly briefly in this video so you can just get a sense of how we deliver DEI related content in our program. But I'm happy to discuss anything in more detail and share some strategies, brainstorm with you in the Q&A that we hold later this month. So what is the situation? Well, I think that many TAs in general embrace DEI concepts and want to create classroom environments where their students feel welcome and supported, but they may feel uncomfortable speaking about some of these issues, or even maybe just aware of how they affect the classroom without having some training and support related to it. This can be especially true for international TAs who may not know some of the historical and societal context surrounding these issues. And often discomfort about a topic can lead to an avoidance of dealing with it or talking about it. So we definitely want to support ITAs in developing their fluency with talking about and handling different situations as they relate to DEI, in the same way that we support them in developing their fluency in other aspects of their classroom communication. So our goal is to help ITAs understand the context and use the vocabulary related to DEI so that we can empower them to not only be more capable of fostering inclusive environments in their roles as TAs, but also consider their own needs as students participating in diverse classrooms. So I'll start out today by telling you about the different instructional formats we've used to deliver content on DEI, since we've tried various different things. And then I'll share the approach that we currently use, and also some of the different methods and tools and topics that we provide resources on. So I've delivered training on DEI to ITAs in all three of these formats, and I'll share a little bit about what has worked best for me. In the workshops, they were part of a series of other related ITA training, and they were delivered in small groups. I would say out of that series of workshops, the DEI ones were not usually one of the most popular workshops in comparison to ones that were offered on things like pronunciation, which the students were much more self-aware of their need for. The DEI workshops were not usually very well attended, but the students who did attend found the information valuable. I did like that students were able to discuss things together, learn from each other. But something that I think to really keep in mind with delivering like workshops on this type of content is just workshop participants are more likely to feel vulnerable or uncomfortable discussing these issues in a group than, say, like a concept in grammar, right? So if you're offering a workshop on DEI, you really need to think about how to like prime them for it, how to describe it to them beforehand and get students motivated about the topic, which I think a lot of times really just means giving them a very clear understanding of what you mean by DEI, so that they know what to expect going into it. In the past couple of years, we have switched to delivering most of our DEI related content just through one-on-one sessions and online materials. One-on-one sessions are led by, excuse me, either me or one of my undergraduate student coaches who work with ITAs in our program. And in that program, ITAs, they complete a self-assessment and they develop a coaching plan with their coach, who they then meet with throughout the term to meet the outcomes that they outlined in that plan. So one of the outcomes that they can set for themselves is, being able to use inclusive language or be able to avoid microaggressions or things like that. So I want to talk about the one-on-one sessions and the online materials in some more detail, because that's really what we have found works the best for us and has really helped us. And the general process that we go through with delivering content in these one-on-one sessions and online materials is shown here. So basically, we start out by really just explaining DEI with concrete, relevant examples. And I can't stress how important this part of the step is to the whole process, because even just like when we started delivering more materials and more content related to this, even in the one-on-one sessions, we didn't always have a lot of student interest in like self-selecting one of those outcomes as like a primary goal for themselves. But after we did some more training with the coaches, with our student employees about how to explain things, what are relevant examples? How does this relate to the classroom? How does this relate to their work as TAs? And we were better able to just kind of give them an overview about what the impact is and why it's important. We had many, many more students choosing to want to work on related issues and want to get training and support related to DEI topics. So I think that first step is super, super important. And then second, give the student agency in choosing what topics they discuss. So some students, they may, feel more comfortable dealing with some things than others already. We want to just make sure that they're involved with that process and they have the autonomy in selecting what they want at that time. The third step, provide materials for students to review at home. I think that it has been really helpful just giving students an opportunity to review and digest a lot of the material prior to discussing it with them. I think for obvious reasons, just sometimes some of the more, it can be a lot, the context, a lot of information all at one time. And so students might want to just have a little bit more time to process that before they're feeling like very ready to engage and discuss those types of topics. So usually we do provide most of our materials just to them online. We might assign a specific thing to them, say, hey, watch this short video or review this material, review this vocabulary set, and then we'll talk about it with you later. So then that's the last step, just having a debrief with the student on it, where we do some kind of guided discussion and just kind of check in with them and discuss what they learned. So here's just a general example of what that process looks like. Let's say the student said that they wanted to review some like vocabulary related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if we're teaching them some DEI vocabulary, then we'll start out with the coach asking them, do you want to practice using inclusive language? They explain how that it relates to their TA work. Then the ITA requests to practice that. Then we assign them a vocabulary set that they then review outside of class. So we might say, just, skim over some of these words. You probably know some of them. Some of them might be new for you. You probably know how to use some of them. You may not know exactly in which situations to use others. So just kind of take some notes that you have about them as you're looking through them, write down any questions that you have, and then we'll talk about it next time. And then finally, we'll have a debrief with them in their next session after they've reviewed some of that. And so I'm going to just briefly show you some of the questions that we go through in that debrief. We don't necessarily ask all of them every single time, but just these are some questions that we provide to our student employees on kind of guiding that conversation. I'm going to just move my head here so you can pause this and look at it if you want to read them in detail, but I'm not going to just read through all of them. Sorry. Okay. But we're really just asking them things like, what did you learn? What was new to you? What questions do you have? And have this guided conversation with them where they're really processing and thinking about some of these issues as we're learning and teaching vocabulary. So here's just a few different topics that we have related materials on. This is not a complete list, but these are different things that have come up in our sessions with students, just kind of general questions that we're commonly getting related to these types of issues. So we've started just compiling a bunch of resources on students about different things related to this. I mean, I think in my opinion, a lot of times when students have, learned about American culture from an ESL textbook or some kind of resource like that, everything is presented in such a, light on a shining hill, like beacon of hope, very, very whitewashed and not always a very realistic portrayal of American society. So we want to try to really provide them with information from good resources that explains kind of how things are the way they are, what are some common issues, what are some things that might come up. So we provide some resources on various different things here. We do not create resources on all of these different topics. Most of the time, what I'm doing is finding like good resources that might be like a short YouTube video or something that just kind of explains some of the context related to some of these different issues. And then I put them in our course Canvas site, which they can then access as like extra credit assignments. And then discuss them with their coach later. All right. And then the last main thing that we provide to students is several different scenarios that we can discuss with them. So I'll just read through this example scenario really quickly. This is a true story that happened in a class on campus. And we use this just to kind of help students think about some of these topics and how they relate to class. So a professor accidentally referred to a student using the wrong gender pronouns during a large lecture class. One of the student's classmates emailed the professor after class to let the professor know about the mistake. And in the next class, the professor publicly apologized to the student in front of the entire class. Do you think this was the best way to handle the situation? Why or why not? So we can take this and use it to just kind of think about, how did the student who was misgendered feel in that situation? Did they feel, maybe they felt glad that they recognized that they made a mistake, the professor made a mistake, but they probably felt really put on the spot and felt really singled out. So that might have made them more uncomfortable. So we talk about a lot of these different things in these conversations that come up from these scenarios. Another scenario that we might share would be this one. So a supervisor of yours uses language or phrasing about different races that makes you uncomfortable. Because they're your boss, you aren't sure how to handle the situation, what could you say or do? And again, we're just helping them to brainstorm different responses here. We're not saying, this is the only option or this is what you have to do, but just brainstorm what kind of phrases they would use, what language would you use in that situation, what resources are there on campus, who would you go to if you need like additional support related to this, and just giving all of these very concrete situations really helps the ITAs to connect this with their everyday life and really think about, how would this relate to me? How will I use this information and apply it? So that's really about all that I wanted to cover today. So my closing tips are, just really make sure when you're delivering content related to DEI issues that you're helping students understand how those topics play a role in their daily life. It's not just, trying to avoid offending someone. It's really about how to make an inclusive environment, how to make everyone feel accepted. And that requires, intentional action. It's not just avoiding offensiveness, right? So really thinking about how to be proactive about being inclusive. Secondly, giving students space and time to process these topics. So we don't just give them a list of, here's different like terms used to describe LGBTQIA plus individuals. Let's talk about them. We might expose them to that prior to class, and then give them a chance to look at it, think about it, and then talk about them later. Giving students agency in selecting what they want to discuss, and then finally providing example language for students to use. Vocabulary, phrases, all of those things go a long way in helping students just feel more comfortable, more fluent in discussing these topics. So we have received positive student feedback from students related to this kind of information and resources that we share. I feel like every time I start working on some of this stuff, there's like so many things that I want to provide to them, like so many more things that I want to cover and resources I want to share. So I'd really love to brainstorm with all of you kind of what types of things you provide with students, and share, helpful resources and things. So I hope to see you all at the webinar in a couple of weeks so we can talk about this some more. Thanks. Bye.